Australia isn't just AC/DC and INXS. Beneath the radio hits lies a hidden continent of sound. Bands that wrote heartbreak like poetry, turned surf energy into punk rebellion, and made the desert sound like outer space. They never conquered the charts, but they built cult followings that still echo through rock today. From garage grit to widescreen melancholy. So crank the volume and dig deeper into the outback of rock. These are 10 underrated Australian rock bands you need to hear. 10. The Triffids. From the wide skies of Perth came a band that made loneliness sound cinematic. The Triffids, led by singer and songwriter David McComb, built songs that felt like short films full of open landscapes, heartbreak, and dust in the air. Formed in 1978, they mixed folk storytelling with sweeping rock arrangements, crafting music that was both intimate and epic. Their breakthrough came with Born Sandy Devotional, 1986, recorded partly in London but soaked in Australian atmosphere, pedal steel, strings, and McComb's voice carrying both hope and despair. It wasn't built for radio rotation, it was built for long drives and late nights. The Triffids never found mainstream fame, but they became a benchmark for emotional honesty in Australian rock. Bands like The National and Nick Cave's later work owe a quiet debt to their cinematic melancholy. Play Wide Open Road, and you'll hear it. That vast, lonely beauty that only an Australian band could capture. 9. The Go-Betweens. From Brisbane's indie corners came The Go-Betweens, literate, understated, and quietly revolutionary. Formed by Robert Forster and Grant McLennan in the late 70s, they wrote songs that felt like postcards from ordinary lives. Romantic, awkward, and real. Their music wasn't loud or flashy. It was built on melody, wit, and the subtle ache of growing up in the shadows of bigger scenes. Albums like Before Hollywood, 1983, and 16 Lovers Lane, 1988, captured that rare balance of jangly guitars and emotional precision. Songs like Cattle and Cane and Streets of Your Town that whispered instead of shouted, but stuck with you for decades. They never cracked the big charts, but critics adored them, and their influence rippled outward through indie rock and college radio worldwide. The Go-Betweens were never chasing hits. They were documenting hearts. Put on Streets of Your Town, and you'll hear how something so gentle could still cut so deep. 8. The Church. Sydney, early 80s. Out of the post-punk haze came The Church, weaving shimmering guitars and dreamlike lyrics into something that felt both spiritual and strange. Fronted by Steve Kilbey, they didn't chase radio trends, they built worlds. Jangly guitars, layered reverb, and cryptic poetry turned their songs into soundscapes you could live inside. Their defining moment came with Under the Milky Way, 1988, a haunting, ethereal track that drifted between dream pop and psychedelia. It became their global breakthrough, but The Church were never a one-song band. Albums like Heyday and Starfish showed their knack for balancing mystique with melody, a mix that made them cult heroes across continents. They were too atmospheric for hard rock, too thoughtful for pop. And that's exactly why they lasted. Decades on, The Church still sound timeless, like they're transmitting from somewhere between memory and outer space. Play Under the Milky Way with the lights low, and you'll understand why it still feels infinite. Before we continue with the video and my further explanation about how Australia's overlooked rock bands built one of the most unique and powerful sounds in the world, I want to ask for your help. I'm trying to reach 1,000 subs by the end of the year, so I'd really appreciate it if you would subscribe and help me out. Okay, let's continue. 7. Hoodoo Gurus. If you blended garage rock grit with pop smarts and a surfer's grin, you'd get Hoodoo Gurus. Formed in Sydney in 1981, they burst out of the post-punk underground with songs that were as catchy as they were clever. Frontman Dave Faulkner led the charge with a knack for hooks that could stick for days, witty, loud, and full of life. Their debut, Stone Age Romeo's 1984, was pure fun, bright guitars, punchy rhythms, and lyrics that winked at rock history while carving their own place in it. Then came Mars Needs Guitars and What's My Scene, songs that turned their garage-born sound into national anthems. They never cared much about trends, one foot in power pop, one in classic rock, and that mix kept them fresh long after their peers faded. The Hoodoo gurus made rock that was joyful without being shallow, nostalgic without being old. Drop the needle on Bittersweet or Come Anytime, and you'll remember what it feels like to love a band that plays like every song's their last. 6. Cold Chisel. Before AC/DC ruled the bars, Cold Chisel ruled the pubs. Formed in Adelaide in 1973, they were Australia's working-class poets. Rough around the edges, but with hearts full of fire. Jimmy Barnes roared like a freight train, Ian Moss answered with smooth, soulful guitar lines, and together they built songs that spoke for anyone who ever clocked out late and dreamed of something bigger. Their sound walked the line between pub rock and soul, bluesy, melodic, and raw. Tracks like K-Son and Flame Trees became national touchstones, the kind of songs that sound best when shouted with a beer in hand. By the time East dropped in 1980, Cold Chisel weren't just a band, they were part of the country's DNA. Outside Australia, they never quite broke through, too local, too honest, too hard to package. But that's also what makes them timeless. Play Cheap Wine, or When the War is Over, and you'll hear the soul of real rockin', roll. Unpolished, unforgettable, and built to last. 5. Radio Birdman. If the Stooges had been born on Sydney's beaches, they would have sounded like Radio Birdman. Formed in 1974 by Detroit transplant Denise Tech and vocalist Rob Younger, the band brought raw, high-octane punk energy to a rock scene still stuck in bar blues. They weren't trying to fit in, they were trying to blow the doors off. Their sound was pure adrenaline. Twin guitars slicing through reverb, relentless drumming, and Younger's defiant bark riding on top. Songs like New Race and Aloha Steve and Dano turned surf culture into rebellion, all delivered with the urgency of a band that knew they were ahead of their time. Their 1977 album Radios Appear became a blueprint for Australian punk, furious, fast, and fearless. But Radio Birdman's DIY attitude also made them outsiders. No major label, no big radio support, just word of mouth and myth. Today, they're legends, the spark that lit Australia's punk explosion. Play Do the Pop, and you'll hear it instantly. Radio Birdman weren't following anyone's rules, they were writing their own. 4. The Scientists. Before grunge, before garage rock revival, there was the Scientists, a band that made distortion sound dangerous again. Formed in Perth in 1978 by Kim Salmon, they started out jangly and poppy, but quickly dove into something darker, swampy guitars, pounding drums, and vocals that sounded half sneer, half fever dream. Their breakthrough came when they moved to Sydney and unleashed We Had Love and Swampland, tracks that felt like rock and roll dragged through the mud and reborn. It wasn't clean, it wasn't polite, and that was exactly the point. Salmon's guitar tone was a revelation, grimy, hypnotic, and alive, influencing everyone from Mudhoney to the White Stripes decades later. They never cracked the charts, but they didn't need to. Their shows were chaotic, their records cult treasures, and their legacy became the DNA of every dirty, feedback-drenched rock scene that followed. Put on Swampland or Atom Bomb Baby, and you'll hear where modern garage rock learned to growl. Messy, menacing, and completely magnetic. 3. Sunnyboys. Few bands captured youthful chaos and heartbreak as perfectly as Sydney's Sunnyboys. Formed in 1979 around brothers Jeremy and Peter Oxley, they blended punk's rawness with jangly pop melodies, turning teenage angst into something bright, loud, and timeless. Their debut single Alone With You still sounds like lightning in a bottle, shimmering guitars, restless drums, and a hook that never leaves your head. It wasn't rebellion for rebellion's sake, it was emotion, urgency, and melody in perfect balance. The self-titled 1981 debut album became an instant Australian classic, equal parts energy and vulnerability. Behind the scenes, the band faced tough breaks, label pressure, relentless touring, and Jeremy's battle with mental health took their toll. By the mid-80s, the Sunnyboys were gone, leaving just 2 albums and a handful of unforgettable singles. But their music never faded. Decades later, Alone With You still plays on Australian radio and fans sing every word. The Sunnyboys proved that rock didn't need walls of noise to hit hard. Just honesty, heart, and one great melody. 2. Hunters and Collectors. Hunters and Collectors were the thinking person's pub rock band, big, brassy, and unafraid to mix raw emotion with art school ambition. Formed in Melbourne in 1981, they took the grit of Australia's live circuit and added something deeper: tribal rhythms, poetic lyrics, and a sound built for both sweaty bars and stadiums. Frontman Mark Seymour wasn't just singing, he was testifying. Songs like Throw Your Arms Around Me and Holy Grail, a later anthem, balanced tenderness and toughness, while the band's horn section gave their music a bold, cinematic pulse. Early on, their sound leaned experimental and moody, but by the mid-80s, they'd honed it into anthems that felt unmistakably Australian. They weren't chasing global charts, they were building connection. Their live shows became communal experiences, part rock concert, part emotional catharsis. Though they brushed against international success, Hunters and Collectors remained a proudly homegrown phenomenon. Play Talking to a Stranger, or When the River Runs Dry and You'll Hear It. Sweat, soul, and sincerity. The kind of songs that don't just fill a room, they pull everyone inside it a little closer. 1. The Drones. If Australian rock has a conscience, it probably sounds like the Drones, raw, poetic, and unafraid to stare straight into the nation's soul. Formed in Perth in 1997 by Gareth Lydiard and Rui Pereira, the Drones built a sound that fused garage grit, blues chaos, and apocalyptic storytelling. Their breakout came with Shark Fin Blues, a song about despair that somehow felt like a victory cry. Guitars crash like waves. Lydiard howls every word as if it's the last thing he'll ever say, and underneath it all, there's an electricity that refuses to die. Critics called it one of the greatest Australian songs ever written, and for good reason. It's equal parts punk spirit and poetic tragedy. Across albums like Wait Long by the River and The Bodies of Your Enemies, Will Float By 2005, and Havilah 2008, they never softened. Their music felt like a storm of conscience, raging against politics, apathy, and the ghosts of history. They never chased pop hooks or easy radio play, but that's what made them powerful. The Drones didn't want to entertain you, they wanted to wake you up. Put on Shark Fin Blues or I Don't Ever Want to Change and you'll understand. This is Australian rock stripped to its bones, fierce, fearless, unforgettable. 10 bands. 10 reasons Australia's rock scene deserves to stand shoulder to shoulder with the greats. From the Triffids' windswept melancholy to the Drones' apocalyptic roar, every one of them proved that distance from the spotlight doesn't mean lack of brilliance. Australia has always played its own tune, proud, loud, and a little left of center. So turn it up, share it around, and keep the music alive. Until then, keep listening, keep remembering,